technology. Please, there's some seats up front if you want to sit down. You're not going to embarrass me by standing in front of everybody. So again, welcome to the Swedish American Chamber of Commerce Gateway, we call it. So I thought I would do something a little bit different. You've heard a lot about all of the wonders of collaboration in the existing technologies. And I've been doing this for a very, very long time and have a very varied background in things that, let's see, here we go here. So just to give you an idea, I've been, if I start from the bottom, a producer and television producer. I did game shows in Europe and also in the United States. You know, you hear the word $64,000 Question. I was the producer of the sequel of that, $128,000 Question. Wheel of Fortune, Family Feud, Liquid in Sweden. I mean, lots of different shows. Trying to do Family Feud in Italy, by the way, quite an experience. Anti-oven telematics, that was some of the very first of the data broadcasting technologies, where we were actually using, I was part of the team that built teletext systems, and that, of course, led to Line 21, capturing for the hearing impaired. Before that, Comtech, which is my production company, that's where I worked with Dave years ago at Financial News Network. We built, had all kinds of interesting production capabilities. ACTV, interactive television. NBC OnSite was one of the very first video digital signage systems using, believe it or not, 25-inch CRTs in supermarkets. If you ever find a white CRT, Sony XBR TV. They were all built for me. They made about 10,000 of them. And every time you see a white one, Sony still looks at me and goes, oh, those white TVs, you did those things. They're all black otherwise. Of course, MSNBC, joint venture between Microsoft and NBC. And we created a system called NBC OnSite, and that MSNBC Desktop, that was sending financial information to institutional investors in office buildings, and we found out very quickly that putting satellite dishes in office buildings was not a good idea, and doing it over T1 lines didn't work, and we had this thing that we're coming up, it's called the Inter something, and so I was part of the team at Microsoft that built the Windows Media Player and the Windows Media Encoder, and that we used for the first broadcast, first streaming media stuff actually was sending financial information from our various systems to institutional investors across the country. That led to a little thing in Transworld Entertainment. Transworld was, you probably don't know the name of the company, but you know its outlets. We had about 2,500 stores. You know them as Musicland, Sam Goody's, FYE, Record Town, Warehouse Entertainment, Camelot. We had quite a few brands all across the country. And I was looking at ways of doing interesting things in those stores. I brought a couple of little gadgets here just to show you. This is a tablet I built for Transworld. It has a scanner at the bottom, a barcode reader on the side. It's a 10-inch touch screen PoE, and this was built in 2000. And we made 25,000 of these things. They're all over the country. And these ultimately became the way you sampled content. And then, of course, it had a back-end system, so if you sampled a particular content, then we added in custom creation of, remember those things called CDs? Whereas in local stores where you wanted to be able to listen to an existing artist, they couldn't put the albums on the discs, on the shelves. So you go up here, you select what you want, and you can actually build a custom CD using these tablet things. Excuse me, you did that? Yeah, so just, and I think the system still works. Then there's a little thing in the publisher, my publisher. Again, anybody know what my publisher is? Well, it's an interesting story. I invited a friend of my son's to our place in Ireland, and he came back as a gift, and I got this lovely book, photo book with stuff inside, little photos. And at the very end, it said, a little comment that said, created and produced by Recollections, handmade, created and produced by, sorry, this one it says, handmade. Remember books? It said, Dunagore Castle was printed and bound by hand by mypublisher.com in Valhalla, New York. Well, very cool book, a little thank you. Cost a bloody fortune to do. Nice gift. And then somebody, by the name of Steve Jobs, I think it was, saw these things. And he called, and he signed a contract with us. And the contract, basically, the first line said, if you tell anybody you're actually doing this for Apple, the contract's null and void. But I want to do this, and we're creating a new product called iPhoto, and we want to add photo books to iPhoto. But you're going to build the back end to it. So the net result was we figured out how to do it. So I had to learn about technology I knew nothing about. How many of you guys know about offset printing? Know about magnetic ink, indigo, and those things like that? So we went to Israel. We found printers. A short run in a digital printing world is about 1,000 sheets. Here we had to have 1 sheet. And when we talked about switches, they weren't switches like we think of switches. These things were giant conveyor belts that took the paper and slit them up and moved them from one place to the other. Absolutely fascinating stuff. But what we did here is we had to turn basically a book that cost, that first book, probably close to $10,000 versus something that was $29. And that's $29 what we sold it for. We had to build it for about $12 or $13. We had it down the end where if you place an order on Apple by 5 o'clock Eastern and you ask for overnight delivery, by 8 o'clock the next morning you'd have a custom personalized book delivered to your doorstep. We did that by tight integration with FedEx. They literally parked trailers in the back of our facility in Valhalla, New York. We tied into their management system, so we knew exactly when the tractor would come to pull the trailer away. We organized all of the printing based on the zip codes, based on what airplane was leaving when first, and then arranged for everything to be sent out at the right time. Big success. Eventually, of course, Apple decided to do it on their own because they didn't want to keep paying us, and when our contract was over. But anyway, that was when my publisher. But then that was sort of on that. The little company called Goldman Sachs called and got involved in starting to do stuff that we're all talking about here. We built the first telepresence system in 12K, not 4K, not 8K, but 12K in 2007. It's, by the way, still running. Very successful system. Unfortunately, I'm under NDA. I can't talk about it too much. But it's, if you think about 4K, if you think, most of our teleconferencing is on at 720p or 1080. When you see 12K video conferencing, it's quite amazing. I was going to replace the batteries, and I just realized this one didn't get replaced. Anyway, that led to Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, then BNY Mellon, and then Neue House, a shared workspace. It was something I did before this space. Any of you familiar with Neue House? Shared workspace here in New York and LA. High-end space over on 25th Street in New York, in LA. We now have 2 locations, and I was one of the co-founders and the CTO of Neue House. So that's what I was doing in the past. Now, and I've always done that through my own association called Harpervision Associates, and I'm also now doing distance learning using some of the technology we've developed in short education, and I'm a senior advisor for a large investment bank that, because of rather NDA rules, are not to be named. Some of you know. Anyway, I thought I'd show you a little something which inspires me. So in this particular video here, I'll just start playing it here. This is something we did a while back, and my partners in this were Mickey Dubno, who's the CTO at Goldman Sachs, CIO at Bank of America, and
I
Dan
love
Dubno.
Gadget Off. It's like the ultimate geek fest.
Hey, why don't you watch this a second.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, yeah.
Gadget Off. It's not just about gadgets, it's about innovation. It's about invention. Some of these things might be fun. Some of them might be kind of crazy.
That was crazy. That's a Lenovo laptop, by the way, being thrown on a trebuchet.
Bottom line is most of these things are things that are going to profoundly change the way we look at the world and the way we think about technology.
He has no arms, no hands.
Right now I have idea overload because if you go around here, I reach my limit of being able to present some more new ideas.
If you want to know what the future will look like, you have to invent it yourselves. These are the people who are inventing it.
So I normally stand up to an audience like this and give a really depressing talk about energy and climate change. But today, because it's Gadget Off, I'm going to just talk about something that I find beautiful and maybe useful. We just don't know how yet.
What I care about is a future of very, very different transportation of self-driving cars. This is extreme driving. It's called parking in New York.
I'm actually here to share one of the robots that we've been working on. Brought it in my coin pocket. Let me get this guy out here. This guy is less than 1 centimeter across.
The hydraulophone is the world's first musical instrument that produces sound from vibrations in water itself.
You guys can write on buildings with lasers, so maybe you can make this guy make graffiti again. The catch is he can only use his eyes.
So this was the Homeland Security guy, and he showed that flashlight that makes you vomit.
We reverse engineered how it works and basically made our own open source version.
Yeah, and we have it here today.
And it's all absolutely true. The Soviet Union really did build a doomsday machine that would have allowed them to retaliate against an American nuclear strike that knocked out the Kremlin and the defense ministries.
Over here on the side of the stage is the world's fastest high-speed video camera. This is about a $250,000 camera. There's about 4 of them in North America, and we're able to shoot up to 1 million frames a second.
1 million frames a second.
I was asked a couple of years ago, give me something I can put on these kids so they can pick up a raisin or a grape off a tape, know the difference without looking at it. Tell them they're nuts. So I can almost do it.
I saw who are we, where do we come from, where are we going, where have we been, answered in new ways that it hasn't been answered before through technology and improving human experience.
So I showed you that because I look at all technology that's totally different, and I try to apply that technology. So Gadget Off's obviously an extreme circumstance. You saw that was 2009. We actually continued them not in New York. We continued them on the West Coast for Google. And I have other videos that show Sergey and Larry climbing up the side of the Google headquarters using the Atlas Ascender. I mean, just some very cool stuff. But I'm not here to talk about Gadget Off. I am talking about how those type of things inspire us. So Mickey Dubno, who was the guy in the center there, as I said, he was the CTO of Goldman Sachs, the CIO of Bank of America. He built the trading systems that saved the banks zillions of dollars. Dan was the executive producer of CBS Evening News, responsible for new technology. So when you see a satellite image fly in the news going for a place where a location, go down and zoom into it, Dan pioneered all that stuff with what we called Google Earth at the time. And I talked about some of these other things, my publisher, Digital Cinema for Global Collaboration, ACTV. I mean, all these are things I've been using. And I get inspired by things. So the way we came up with the 12K video conferencing was that I was at a conference about digital cinema at the University of California, San Diego, and saw some of the new techniques being used in digital cinema. And I went, ooh, I could use that in collaboration. And of course, the cameras didn't exist, the codecs didn't exist, the screens didn't exist. So we had to make it. We had to build it all together, and it worked. Going forward, at Neue House, for example, so I applied some of this technology. So this is what we did in the collaboration system. That's a multi-screen projector system. Of course, it's been replaced by touchscreens now. Using technology that we found that was actually originally technology used for writing on for Symbian phones. Remember those before Apple phones came along? They were looking for a way to actually input data into them. So we used that technology to do here. I still actually have some of it working here. The distance learning system, I took that and turned it into a distance learning system. I can show you that in the back end, but we now have studios in the United States, so professors go to studios at Stanford University, putting one in Berkeley next couple of weeks from now. We have it also in Massachusetts, in Boston, and at Amherst, so I think there are 7 studios altogether now. It combines broadcast technology with Zoom, with a custom version of Zoom, with the collaboration technology you saw before, and it's all powered over AWS. So all of this is web-based and all the rest. And we have classrooms, simultaneous live classrooms in. We just actually fired them up in Qatar. So we have them in Doha, which are actually launching tomorrow. We have them in India, and we have them in China. Very interesting right now. I've been waking up very early in the morning dealing with my Chinese issues. But people are actually we now morph this into, they go into classrooms to see it, but we're moving it into now direct-to-device as well as classrooms. And the students, it's all live, and it's two-way. And it uses QSYS for video camera control, Panasonic PTZ cameras. You see some of them around here. There's a 4K version here, a 1080 version there. We all, of course, over IP, and all of this on a global basis, all powered by AWS. That's the studio on the bottom right here. That was before I cleaned up the wiring. And you can see the students just go, that's Stanford there. That's a classroom, I believe, in Shanghai. We've built so many of the classrooms, I don't remember where they all are anymore. So I was going to talk about where we're going and what all this means. And so the stuff I'm looking at today is stuff that you've all heard about, 5G, but differently than what you've talked about. It's not just about speed. AI computing, of course, digital production, immersive imaging, 8K Ultra HD. I guess it's a step down from 12K. Sensors, wearables, robotics, and of course gaming. These are all things that inspire me and help me figure out where the future of technology is going. So let me move right ahead to 5G. So I heard yesterday, I think someone was talking about 5G and how it's going to be important, asking 5G versus Wi-Fi 6, et cetera. And I think a lot of people don't really understand 5G. Fortunately, the chamber here is actually, the board of directors are the CEOs of major corporations, and Ericsson is, of course, a Swedish corporation, and they are one of the 3 leaders in 5G. So he spent a fair amount of time up here, as has the chairman of Verizon, as has the head of the ITU, as had the head of the 5G system. And we've talked at great depth about 5G. So 5G, yes, it indeed is designed for higher speeds. I'll show you what the real speeds look like here in New York in a second. But it's really about software-defined networking. So it's really about edge computing. So a 5G access point, they're not building 5G just to give us better download speeds for our movies. They're really using it for IoT and IoT intelligence of device, not Internet of Things. They're using it to put smarts and connectivity where the device that you have in your hand connects by millimeter wave to a hotspot that may only be, that little thing on the ceiling here. It may be very short range. Remember, it's secure because you have a SIM card, so it's point-to-point, unlike Wi-Fi where anybody can join it. So there's a lot more to 5G than what everyone thinks just in terms of the speed. So when you're asking why is 5G important versus Wi-Fi 6, well, with the chips that are happening and the volumes they're going to be building these things in, you're going to find sensors and other things like that with 5G capability built into them. And if for example, let's say that my watch detects that I'm needing medical assistance. The watch will communicate to the 5G, and right now what it does, it goes back to the phone, and then connects back to the network and to the hub, and then some service connects it back, and then, for example, let's say I need a defibrillator. And then it finds out and calls the police, and the police figure out, come over here, by 911, we just heard about it, and then they know where we are, and they go and find it. Well, in the 5G world, the defibrillator would actually be a 5G node, and the watch would be a 5G node. And so when that happens, it would actually activate that thing and start flashing and saying someone needs help. And by the way, the defibrillator might be just down the hall. So it actually could save huge amounts of life. That's just a huge number of lives. That's just one small example of where 5G is going to happen because it's now software-defined networking. The networking is going to put itself together and connect you. So it's not just a Wi-Fi to a general concept of having a service in the cloud. The actual access points, the actual Wi-Fi base stations actually become the computing. So edge computing, and of course that's going to open up all the stuff in AR, VR, so you have the latency, so you don't have to have all that stuff on your head. So fast throughput, low latency. Intelligence of Things, and it will complement Wi-Fi 6. And yes, it is fast. And a lot of people say, well, you know, where is it? Let me show you here. This at CES, Sony showed this camera, this here, with a 5G connection on it. And it was used during the Super Bowl, and some of the things you were watching at the Super Bowl were actually being sent over 5G. So it is that now that obviously they set up the Super Bowl to do 5G capable, but it's real. It really is using it. You really are getting the high speeds associated with it. The launch of the Samsung Galaxy S20, which happened, I guess about a week and a half ago. I don't know how many of you, any of you see the launch video or watch it? Yeah. So if you recall, they started off by talking about the flip, and yes, here it is if you want to see it. There's the Samsung Z. Its competitor, by the way, is the is the Razor. You can see those later. But they start off by demonstrating these phones in the thing, and they were showing a video into a large number of people, and they had a guy with a Steadicam, and he was running around and shooting it all. And then they said, oh, by the way, come over here, and the guy with the Steadicam came over, and it was in fact a fake camera, and they were actually broadcasting from the phone. And that phone, by the way, does 8K, and it does live streaming, and it has an incredible sensor on it. But they were actually using it. So Super Bowl, Samsung, this is real. This is not make-believe. And just to put that into perspective, these are the 4G speeds. This was in Bryant Park. This is a 4G phone. On my Apple iPhone, 58 megabits, 7.2 uploads. But look at the download speed here. This is Bryant Park. These are actual speeds from my speed test. This is the iPhone versus the Samsung. So here you got the Samsung 5G, upside down, but nonetheless, Samsung 5G, iPhone 11 Pro, whatever the highest level one is, and you're now seeing the speeds. The upload speeds aren't quite there yet in Manhattan, but obviously they were for the Super Bowl, and they were for the Samsung launch. I'm sorry I can't show you the 20 because it doesn't come until Monday, but I'll have it on Monday. So that phone, by the way, there are 3 flavors of 5G. Most people don't realize that. The different bandwidths, and that almost every cell tower that's been built over the past 7 years by Ericsson, which is a lot of them in the United States, and Nokia as well, are all software upgradable to 5G. So it depends on which bandwidth. So we hear about 5G and the millimeter wave. Yes, those need new towers because it's a much shorter range. But they also work in the low bandwidth as well as the T-Mobile, for example. So right here in this neighborhood on T-Mobile 5G, I'm getting not quite 1.3 gigs, but I'm getting about 600 or 700 megabits download speeds right downstairs here in New York City. So this is real. So you now bring the other one in as AI. So I'm sure some of you have seen the Amazon Go stores. They started off in San Francisco. There's one right over here, if you haven't seen it, on 53rd, just off Lexington Avenue. 53rd off Lexington Avenue. They're cashless. You basically scan your app. You go in. It feels like you're stealing. The ceiling is made up of a series of sensors that tracks where you're going. Knows exactly what you've picked up. I've tried to fool it. I've tried to take something off the shelf, look at it, put it in my walk around, stick it back on the shelf to see whether it does. It does a pretty good job. Of course, I don't know how many of you read the New York Times the other day, but New York City is passing a law that says that you cannot have a facility that does not take cash, and therefore it's discriminatory against. So the politicians in some cases are actually working against some of this technology. So we have to be careful about those things. But it's happening. My wife claims that I'm married to herself and to somebody else. My ring here, this is a smart ring. It is full of sensors. But you're seeing that in Sweden, for example, a lot of people are having chips implanted in them, so you don't actually have cash or credit cards. You just wave your hand or your ring. The ring will do it. It knows that I have it on because there's sensors on it. It knows if I'm alive. So it's actually looking at pulse and things of that nature. Of course, it's doing medical stuff as well. So you're seeing that here coming in. But what's happening is it's really it's cloud computing, but it's also artificial intelligence because it's figuring out what I'm picking up. It's using imagery. It's using sensors. And sensors are a lot more than the way we think about sensors. So let's take facial recognition. So this is facial recognition. You know, we all know about it in the video world where we detect, speak, or track. We all have to deal with that. But it's also being used, of course, in the retail to figure out what people are doing. But anybody go to CES this year? Dave? Okay, this is called parallel reality. And it's a sign, and as you notice, the sign says, "Hello, Greg Harper." So that is using some very interesting technology. So Delta Airlines was a keynote speaker this year, and this is real. So it looks like a sign, just has my name on it, right? The point is that every one of you looking at that sign would see your name at the same time. And you go, well, wait a minute, how'd that happen? So it uses facial recognition. It uses your eyes. There is an imaging camera that looks for everybody, identifies a person, looks at their eyes, and then there are little miniature robotics lenses in front of every one of the triads of pixels, and it actually aims the lens at your set of eyes. Now, you think this is science fiction. It's not. I watched this thing, I sat next to a whole bunch of other people, and it was actually doing it. Now, the sign has to be big because obviously next to every one of those pixels for my name are the pixels for your names. They've showed it. They say it will do up to 100. I saw it with about 20 people, but they tell me it'll work with 100. It'll be rolled out in Detroit Airport this summer. It's technology, though, that we've seen before. It was done, a lot of people were using it for trying to do VR without, eyeglasses and all the rest. So the idea of actually aiming the pixels is not new, but this is a huge sign. So instead of the airport seeing all those things, it'll say, so you scan your boarding pass, it then says, oh, I know, and it knows me because it's got my biometrics, and they're using that for boarding and everything else. So this stuff is actually happening pretty quickly. And when we talk about sensors and all the rest, well, I'll get to those in a second. So virtual film production is another one of those things that are happening that we should have used this to understand where things are going in the world of technology and collaboration. So this is from Gemini Man. So basically, Will Smith, the actor here, with dots on him, was actually be able to create two versions of him, a younger version and an older version, and he was acting in real time. And so that was all happening, so we were watching it. Sony at CES and at ILM, also they're doing this. Most of the time when people are acting, they're in front of a green screen, and they're standing in front of a green screen. Well, now, by using some of the new LED technology, by the way, this is a 1.5 millimeter wall. Half decent, but if I get really close to it, I can see the pixels. You probably can too from this distance. We're putting a 1.2 in, or Barco's putting a 1.2 in the other room very shortly. Sorry I wasn't here for today. But when it really gets down to 0.4 millimeter pixel space between the pixels, it's really hard to tell. And Sony and others are now using that to, instead of having a green screen, they're actually composing the image at the same time in real time up there. So you're actually acting. And I mean, it's quite amazing. You're in there and you're working and you're next to R2-D2, and there's R2-D2, except he's not there. It's it's a virtual thing. You're on a space. You're on some moon in outer space. Well, you're looking. You see the moon. At CES, Sony showed it with a set from Ghostbusters, and there was a physical Ghostbusters car, and as the camera panned, they were changing the perspective. I first looked at it and I went, why are they showing Ghostbusters? What's the big deal? Had this camera on a pan, and I thought it was a real set. And then I looked at it and I said, oh my God, it's not a set. It's actually the crystal LED using this micro technology, and it was actually changing perspective. It was volumetric video. It was actually redoing the video based on digital. That's all based on GPUs, et cetera. That's going to change a lot of things that we do. And the first one here is neon. So this woman, sorry, the picture's not that good. When you walk up to, they're life-size neons, that's what we call them, neons, and they are what looks like real people. And they talk to you, and they move, and they look, and they speak, and their eyes move, and all the rest. But they're not. They're avatars. It is the imaging of essentially Alexa or Google. So as they speak, they've literally got an iPad, and they can make a smile and wink your eye and all the rest. And they're now turning that. Of course, this neon can speak any language they want, can stand there forever. but it is uncannily real. And that's just a prototype. It's going to happen. So you're taking now imagery, you're taking all this digital cinema technology we've been using. That's what we're watching. Notice any time you go to the movies, how many credits are for digital artists. It's because that's how they're making the movies. It's actually cheaper for them to do the digital imaging and the compositing than it is to actually build a set or move on location. So a lot to learn from the digital cinema world. And this next piece here is another example. This is volumetric video. This came from Intel. Now, I will tell you right now, I shot this with a camera during a press conference, but the quality isn't quite there yet. But if I play this,
on the hand side, you see examples of various streams that a professional or a casual producer could create. And with volumetric video, we can create infinite perspectives, any location, any position on the field. So as an example, we can show what is it like to be the quarterback during the snap. There is no camera on the quarterback. This is entirely created from our 3D model of the game. But let's say you love defense, right? What about seeing things from the safety's perspective? And let's say you want to go up a little bit higher, call it the bird's eye view camera, but again, from the defensive side, a view that you'll traditionally very rarely see. And I hope what you're seeing here is that the promise of volumetric video has in sports. We figured out the speed portion of the puzzle, now we got to work on the quality portion of the puzzle.
so this is being used, this gaming is driving this business. GPUs are driving the business. We all talked about CPUs and how CPUs get better and better. It doesn't matter about CPUs anymore. It's all about GPUs. Panasonic's not here, right? Yeah, sure.
What's the GPU acronym?
Which one?
What's the acronym?
Graphics Processing Unit. So with a GPU, so a number of people are doing this now, but Panasonic, for example, has an 8K camera, and I'll show you a picture of it in a second, that will actually output multiple streams simultaneously. So it's got imagers, and it brings all that stuff in and processes it in real time. But Sony's doing it, Ikegami's doing it, they're all doing it. That 8K camera, by the way, just showed up in the Samsung phone. The Panasonic broadcast camera costs $100,000. The Samsung phone costs $1,200. It's coming. This is not science fiction. But what you looked at, you thought, oh well, there's a cameraman moving around. There's no cameraman there. Those are all virtual cameras. There's no camera pointing at everybody. There's nothing around. They can shoot from any direction they want. So what they do is they get an image of the entire space, they process that in real time, and the graphics, and as you want to change the action, it actually modifies the image. It's the same thing you're doing if any of you gamers in here, if you're a gamer in here, it's the same thing you're expecting in gaming, except this is now heading to production. So now think about this for a conference room. Think about this for a meeting where we're all sitting around the table. I can now get any angle. I don't have to worry about where I put the cameras, whether it's high or low. I don't have to worry about whether it's in the center table or not, because all of a sudden I can process it. Now again, not for today, not for tomorrow, but it's coming. And it's being driven by some pretty powerful things. By the way, that technology that was made possible, that makes the LED things possible. So right now, on these LED walls, and they're all made pretty much the same way, a robot puts the triads of LEDs onto a little chip, and the chips get put together. And the precision of how close you put them depends on how good the robotics are, and that's how expensive it becomes. The new technology, though, they're actually making the chips. And I call them chips, but they're actually making, think of the little Hershey bars. They're actually baking them just like a CPU or a GPU or any other memory chip. So when you'll end up getting the 0.4 and the 0.6 millimeter resolution, because it's actually the chip, it's not individual LEDs. It'll actually be cheaper to have a 0.4 or 0.6 than the stuff we're talking about now. And I got to tell you, if you've never had a chance to see it, take a look at it. You can get within millimeters of the thing, and you cannot see the dots, because it's actually embedded in the chip, and they're building it. So once they get it at Foundry, put it into a machine, out they come, and then just snap them together magnetically. And you can make displays of any size you want. So now you have a display of any size you want with active activity. Don't have to worry about these things, physically putting them in, solder joints, and all the other things. This becomes a totally new way of imaging. So movies. This is The concept here is a conference room. This is Kingsman. And so in the movies, I always think back to Goldfinger when, they had the original car and, it was like a beep, 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 beep. Well, we have a way of tracking people. Of course, we do that now with our watches. This is sort of the Hollywood's version of how a conference room is going to happen in the future. So all these other people are avatars, and this guy is the only person really in the room, and they're just putting on just regular glasses. Well, those regular glasses right now, if I want to do AR, unfortunately, the glasses are pretty bulky. You're talking about something like this, which, I cannot imagine, the CEO of a major corporation putting this thing on.
I can imagine it. It's actually fun to think about.
Okay, but I can see you all, and I now have overlays, and I've got my power in here. Okay, now, take this technology. So they have to put the battery, you have to have the GPU in here. You have to have the imaging device in here. So now, let's think about this in a 5G world. Let's think about this in a world where I have the ability to put all the processing in the cell site, not in my machine. All of a sudden, that thing gets much, much smaller. The next example is Nreal, which is these. Unfortunately, it's real, it exists, but I just got an email yesterday saying, because of the problem in China, we are not going to be able to ship your product right away. Please apologize, but our factory is closed. But it's coming, as soon as the sun happens down. This device here, and I'm sorry I didn't bring it, but I have it at home. This is 3D looking at holograms without any glasses. It's just a thick piece of glass, and it's actually all 3D using optics. So that's real. So again, it's going to the forward.
Can I pause you there for a second for
Yeah.
a question? This is something that came up in an article that I published recently, and I actually want your comments on it because it's interesting. If we're 2 years probably away from glasses that look like regular glasses, having this AR imagery and having these sensors in them, how do you know if I'm negotiating a contract with you that I'm not looking at your pulse and I'm not taking lie detection from you and I'm not seeing what all of that technology. Now, there are some beneficial uses for that you can have visual cues for the hearing impaired. They can, you can see it's really good, but I could also be, doing a lie detector or any other type of imagery. It's going to be in our society way before we're prepared for it.
Absolutely. And I was number 122 to get Google Glass, number 2 in New York City. And so I went through a number of them before they finally closed the thing. I was actually at a meeting with Sergey, and he didn't have his on. And I just figured, oh, well, if he's not have his on, I should take mine off, too. When any of you want to hear about the launch of Google Glass, that was a lot of fun. But anyway, I was called a glasshole. People...
And you still are in some circles, yes.
So I still have it. I have prescription lenses in it. And people were very worried that I was, in fact, exactly that. I was taking pictures about things, even though when I did take a picture, it did light up. You knew I was taking a picture. But people were very concerned about it. I would go into private clubs and, I don't know, glasses are one thing, but, we don't like cell phones, but what's that thing on your head? And then going into, of course, I work with investment banks, large banks, where security is an issue. Walk into a Goldman Sachs or Bank of America wearing Google Glass. Not so happy people.
So I want you to comment on this either now or when you're done your presentation. I want our audience to comment on this. We are talking about some stunningly fascinating technologies, but is our culture ready for them?
Well, the perfect example is the one that just the New York Times article about New York City stopping, not allowing Google. It's not just Google. The Amazon Go store, Sweetgreens is doing the same thing. No cash. They're saying it's people who don't have credit cards and don't have cell phones are being disadvantaged. I personally have more or less given up on cash. I actually had to pay for something the other day, and I went, oh, I got cash. Yeah, I still have cash. But it's change, and whenever change happens, it changes the rules and everything else. So the technology is coming. Apple, we know, is doing it. We know that 5G is going to make this possible, and that's where it's not about speed. It's because the processing is in the cell tower, and it's so close to us that the latency is so low that all the processing can be there, so I can put much, much smaller and lighter weight things on my eyes and heads doing it. So it's happening. But you're right, Dave. It's going to be something to look at. Yeah.
What about the radiation factor with 5G? People
We're talking about millimeter wave, the half life of the range of a problem is a half a millimeter for the power that we're talking about. And remember, on cellular, the objective is to have to lower the power, not to raise the power, because you want to have as many cells as you want. That's why they call it cellular. So, the more cells you put in, the more people you can put into it. So it's not an issue. It's it's the old thing. It's like, oh, we're going to tower up. Well, it must be dangerous. But I mean, what Dave is saying is actually that those are the real questions. It's the society things. I mean, you've brought up the real issue. Yeah.
Jerry, hold on. You are recording.
Thanks. I'm Jerry Berger with Legrand. So we're talking about new advances of technology, and we're also talking about video conferencing environments, whether they be in-room or remote or whatever. When does the experience change to no longer having a display, a display on the wall or a display on the laptop, but rather a augmented reality video conference where you could work from anywhere, especially in these days of coronaviruses, and experience the same kind of functionality of total collaboration of not only video, but every source I might need to contribute to that collaboration. When does that happen?
It's going to happen a lot sooner than you think. I had to do a meeting the other day, and one of my colleagues, who was actually at the meeting here yesterday, couldn't join us. And so I took this little stabilizer from $125 from DJI. I put in a iPhone, or what I think I put the Samsung phone in, it doesn't matter. Put a phone in here, connected up to Zoom, and we ended up doing a virtual meeting walking around a construction site, and with other people going along doing it all at the same time. So pretty bulky right now. I still have to hold this. I got the phone, all the rest. If I had, I could have put on that Magic Leap device or Google Glass and all the rest, and done it personally.
And there are some glasses on the market that you see.
There are a number of glasses on the market
that
that do that. And again, by the way, this Gateway is only one of my labs. The real crazy stuff is not here. It's over at my home, not too far from here. But yeah, I've got all of those systems, and they're all doing it. It's still bulky, but as soon as the bulk goes down, and we're going to see that with Apple pretty quickly. We're going to see that from Samsung. I've seen a number of patents being put on there. So as soon as that happens, whether it's something in your body pack and there's a wireless connection to your headset, you want to, wired makes a difference because it's the power. But the moment you're able to put a very lightweight piece of glass on your head, and they're inexpensive, this thing's $127. You're going to be able to do this. And so it's a matter of just the price point going down and enough people taking on. But once you do it, and you take things like Zoom, and I'm a big fan of Zoom, I mean, we could all join the Zoom call all simultaneously by looking at it with our glasses on. And you're right, we won't need anything else.
And it changes the entire dynamic.
Absolutely.
Everything we've been talking about for the last couple of days.
Absolutely.
All of the integration, all of the expense, all of the budgeting, all of the enterprise work, it flips it on its head.
It flips it on its head. And so, again, I don't want to, I deal with the things that we've been talking about here for the past 2 days. Okay, I deal with those every day. This is a lab here. We have real people in real conference rooms, and I'm dealing with, oh my God, the HDMI doesn't fit, and all the USB doesn't connect, and the speakers don't work, and the microphone doesn't work, and we got to build out 20-some thousand conference rooms, and how we're going to do it in prem, and all of the things that we've been talking about. I deal with those every single day. I deal with it, remotely in China. I deal in Doha and India, and that's a lot of interesting times. But I also, the reason I showed you that little video at the beginning is because I have a passion for seeing where things are going. And I look at things that are made totally unrelated and saying, oh my God, let that inspire me, and how can I evolve it? How did I take digital cinema and turn it into 12K video conferencing at Goldman Sachs? I mean, that's the type of thing. Now, did the product exist? No. Did we have to get somebody in Japan to build it for us? Yes. Did we have to get export licenses, by the way? They didn't want to let us export the cameras because they couldn't figure out what we were going to do, why a bank would want 12K cameras. They thought it was going to some satellite for spying. But you got issues like that, but it's evolution. But who would have thought? I mean, think back a number of years ago, not that many years ago. I mean, we are now doing video conferencing from anywhere, whether it's in my car, whether it's sitting at home, whether it's sitting here. And you've heard multiple people say, you know, the issue of reliability isn't there anymore. I mean, it just works. We're privileged to have 2 grandkids, and 2 and almost 3 and 5. And Sloan, the 5-year-old, my wife was out at the house, and you know she lives in obviously in a pretty high tech space in our home. And she said, well, she wanted to turn off the living room lights, and you know, Sloan looked at it and said, well, Goppy, I mean, what do you mean? Where's the light switch? Yeah. She, Alexa, turn off the lights. You know, and she said, well, how do we turn on the TV? Alexa, turn on the TV. I mean, that's what they're growing up to be. And those are the people that are coming into the workplace. And those people, that's what they're going to be doing. That's what they're expecting. And they're going to expect those type of things. And so we've got to be ready for it. And that, of course, leads me to my next slide, which is sensors, robotics, intelligent devices. So, you know, this is a Roomba that actually empties itself. This is the Nest doorbell. So this thing here, and I brought it just so you see it, you know, this thing has facial recognition built into it. So you press the doorbell, it says Greg's at the door, or whoever's at the door, Dave's at the door. It knows who it is. And you know, it's no different, the same technology that Delta is using. It's a $100 item that's there. Obviously, Google and all the rest. You have smart watches. You have monitoring, and it's not just physical devices. For example, in sensors, this looks like a tag, right? It's a label. Well, actually, this, if you pull this back, you will see it's filled with circuitry. And this is a temperature system that you stick on produce or food or something that's being shipped. And this will measure the temperature every 10 minutes or whatever you want to do, and give you a reading from it. And it will save like 50,000 temperature readings. And then when you get to the destination NFC, you read it through, and you'll know whether your product has been subject to heat or something else. You can put, you know, these things could be badges you put on your body. So it's flexible. It doesn't. This is where the technology is going. Here's another one. Okay, it's a fork. This measures how fast I eat and how I move and whether I'm eating too fast or whatever. I mean, it's a gimmick. It's one of those things that they show at Eureka Park. No commercial value in it, but it just shows where people are thinking about in terms of sensors. And then you then take it to one step further. So here we go. Another Amazon product. This is called Amazon Look. So this one is a sensor that you use, you put on your dresser, and then you show it what you're wearing, and it then says, not so good, that doesn't match. By the way, you wore this the other day, so that's adding artificial intelligence. It automatically makes recommendations. This is the flick button. Anybody know about these things? These are little self-contained buttons. You push the button, they stick on with a sticker. You can connect these up to any kind of system you want, and now it can do whatever you want. You know, open the door, turn on the lights, start the coffee, program it any way you want. But then we talk about the beauty of 5G. So this little guy is another sensor. So this sensor has an interesting capability. It is a cellular-enabled sensor. So this thing, I actually use it to track my bags, but it has accelerometers in it and all the rest, so if the bag is on the airplane is moving fast, it won't transmit. As soon as it lands, it will automatically do it. It does GPS. It has GPS. It has transmission, cellular capabilities. In Barcelona, they're sticking these things in trash cans, and they're using it to measure how much trash is in the trash can. And they're all, you know, they stick them in the bottom of the trash can, and then the trucks go around because they have, you know, recycling. So they have some for glass, green glass, white glass, paper, and all the rest. And so it automatically tells you how full the trash can is, and automatically it allows you to route the trucks around the city to pick up the trash where it really is. And that's where smart cities go in. So again, all I'm trying to say is you need to think about these things outside of the day-to-day capabilities. And you know, I speak about robotics. I showed you the handheld thing, the gimbals. This is interesting. This is a security system. So it's a pod that you stick outside your house. When it detects an intruder coming in, the door is open, the drone flies up, uses AI to track you, finds you, follows you around, takes a picture of the license plate of the car, or follows you along and calls the police. And it has about a 45-minute endurance capability. No.
But there's a kid online for that.
So the other one here is, again, I look at these things, and I found this from a Chinese AI company. And it's a little finicky at times, so we might have to wait until I get to the other room to show you. But this is a robot that, of course, does not want to respond. You know, this thing is, as I said, it's got a personality. But this is a robot that is not working. Okay. No, I can put it on here? Okay. All right. I am Interstellar Region T9. So obviously it's a car, and I can drive it with my remote. But it also has something else. Hey, T9. Transform. Hey, T9. Dance, please. Dance.
Pretty please.
Hey, T9, dance. Hey, T9, dance. Well, I'll get it going. Anyway. Yeah. But, okay, so you're saying, you know, obviously this is fun, and my grandkids love it, obviously. But more importantly, there are 22 motors in here. There are sensors, there are accelerometers, there are position sensors, it knows where it's standing. I can set this thing up and actually make it walk, and wherever my cell phone is here. And we can do things besides.
Which one?
Excuse me?
Yeah, which cell phone? Which is the
well,
real one?
Which is the real one? T9, and we will connect in here after the little video that tells me about how wonderful the company is. RoboSen is the company, and I'm going to connect, and come on, T9, connecting, and now I'm going to remote control, and it will do things. You know, it'll go up there and, or it will actually shoot if you want. You didn't get that, David. I just shot you.
Oh, sorry. Walmart was shooting me at the same time.
Anyway, so again, it's a toy, but I look at this and I look at what's the technology behind this, and I say, well, how can I use this for transforming displays? The same technology is behind this as what behind that digital signage. This is where technology is going, and what's driving it, the other thing that's driving it is esports and gaming. Don't underestimate that. The esports and gaming thing is now bigger than the movie industry and the music industry combined. The GPUs, the technology, all of that's happening here. That is an esports arena. These guys are making hundreds of millions of dollars in cash for playing on. Go to the Microsoft store on Park Avenue upstairs. You'll see a complete esports environment up there, gaming. It is very real, and that's driving the GPUs. Those GPUs are what's allowing us to do all the other fancy stuff we're talking about. So, and that's a movie theater. Again, movie theaters are trying to figure out what's going on. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I thank you for your watching. Maybe I'll get T9 to dance at some point, but maybe come back into the office. But there's a lab here, and after, are we taking a break or?
No, we're going to go right into the next presentation. But any questions? We can take some time if anybody has any questions.
I wanted to ask.
Grab a microphone here.
Scott Durham, Yorktail. I wanted to ask, you mentioned 5G for those of us who deal with the federal government, all the stuff about the feds not wanting to use Huawei and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting problem, and there's politics in it, of course. I mean, obviously, you know, we do the same thing. I mean, Cisco has backdoors, et cetera. So what they're concerned about is that a company that they have no control over has access to the technology. Cisco does too. They believe Cisco is going to do the right thing. They believe Ericsson's going to do the right thing. They believe Nokia is going to do the right thing. They don't have that feeling for Huawei. And, you know, they've had examples of Huawei stealing stuff, and they're using it. But, you know, again, the politics of it. All these things have backdoors. We all know. I mean, we probably all know the secret password to Crestron. We probably all know the backdoor into Cisco because we use them all the time. And it's no different on the cellular stuff, on the mobile stuff. So it's a question of policy and whether you believe the way they handle it. It's a political game. But yes, do they have a backdoor? Yes. Does Cisco have a backdoor? Yes. Does Ericsson have a backdoor? Yes. Does Nokia have a backdoor? Yes. The question is, who has the key? Anybody else?
You know, Greg and I see each other, at least so far, see each other every year at CES, usually online at about 7 in the morning, barely groaning, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this again this year. It's not fun. CES is not fun. It's
This
really
will be
pain.
my 46th year at NAB.
It's amazing.
Without missing one. And I don't know how many years for CES.
But we talk in the industry about, you know, sure we go to Infocom and sure we go to ISC, but, you know, you have to go to CES. You have to go to trade shows and conferences and presentations outside of your comfort zone to learn where the technology is coming from in order to understand where your industry is going. So that's why we say it's so important.
Yeah, it really, I mean, Dave is absolutely right. I mean, it's, you get myopic, and, you know, the real problems come in. I mean, I literally just before this was dealing with a problem in a conference room, and oh my God, this doesn't work, and how are we going to do with it?
So I want you to deal with a real problem. And
Yes.
This is Ann Erin, IMCCA and TRI. How is what you're doing going to impact what's happening with the coronavirus, which looks like it could be a very serious situation?
So the coronavirus issue is obviously one that we're not prepared for, and actually, I'm actually going to D.C. on Thursday and going to the National Institutes of Health for a conference on rare diseases. So NIH, yeah. So there's, you know, we're thinking about it, but we don't have the reporting capabilities. We don't have the way of knowing things, and because the coronavirus is, we don't know about the symptoms. We don't know how it's carried and transmitted. Unfortunately, we do not have the technology today. The technology is coming. This little ring, theoretically, has the capability, if it's properly programmed to look for symptoms, could actually diagnose. That patch that we use for the temperature. I mean, you remember they're taking temperature. Oh, we took a temperature before you got on the airplane and after you got on the airplane. Well, if they put that patch on, it would take your temperature every 5 minutes. And it has smart enough to be able to connect out. So the technology stuff exists. We just don't have it broad enough to get everybody. To distance learning and yeah. So you know, I remember going to Comdex right after 9/11, and nobody was flying. We went to Comdex. The show was virtually empty. And then it just collapsed after that because everybody said, well, why am I going to the trade show when I can do this all remotely? And it started changing. I would not be surprised if Mobile World, for example, would start off as just a gathering of industry heavyweights from heads of telecoms of various countries got together, and then a bunch of people started doing vending around it. I would not be surprised to find the Mobile World after this changes. I mean, look, Samsung's already doing things individually, all the rest. Why? Because they're worried about traveling, they're worried about sending people money all around, putting lots of people together. So I think the coronavirus is going to change things. We don't have the solutions today yet, unfortunately. We have the technology to do it. Yeah.
Grab a mic, Sean.
Hi, Sean Lessman. Been in the industry for a while. On all this, all the markets and the people doing it, all the stuff on facial recognition, AI, and all this. Who's countering all this?
Who's counting?
Who's countering all this? Like which market? Who's getting in the business to keep your privacy? And I'm thinking again back to the federal government. There's obviously an intel agencies that don't want to run around Africa, get their faces taken by Huawei. They know this guy's a spy. These sort of things. Like, so who's in the business of doing the opposite of this?
Well, I mean, we're now talking politics, and I mean, it's all the rest. So, in China, I mean, the word is if you jaywalk across the street, you'll get a ticket before you get to the other side because they've got cameras everywhere and they look at you. And if you've seen something, and I've seen it. I mean, I try to buy, you know, use cash to pay for a cab. They look at me like I've got two heads. You try to get, you know, a beggar on the street. They won't, you know, they only take SMS messages, you know, transmission. It's nuts. But that's the way it's going. But
two down.
So, you know, obviously, I should have changed the batteries. You know. So I'll get some more batteries to put in here. So Delta is looking at facial recognition for boarding passes. We obviously have Clear now where we can do it, and then biometrics. So it's an opt-in situation, and you have to trust the people doing it. But there's other things too. So if we're doing sensors to measure what's in a room, I just pulled something else out. Yeah, we can get that. I don't know where the batteries are. So anybody know what this is? This is a FLIR camera. It's an infrared camera, infrared sensor, and it measures temperature of people and all the rest and the things. But it could also be used to measure how many people in the room. Yeah, no, it's not going to not get anybody's face. It's going to measure exactly how many people are in here. And oh, by the way, by their temperature and all the rest, and by looking at other metrics, we can actually tell whether they're kids, male, female, active people, whether they're sick or not. So there are techniques that are out there that can do it. So we don't necessarily have to have a camera that actually gets identifiable things. It could also be a camera that just measures. And if we talked about how many people in the room, this would do it very nicely, and I would not know a single name or a facial recognition of anybody. So it's going to be an opt-in and then using technology like this to do it. Yeah.
A political question, more like if I'm just walking down the street in New York, and everybody has their glasses on, and everybody has all this. I'm surprised there's not a market for companies to provide technology that counters the other guy on the street that's taking my
Halloween masks.
Yeah.
So. So we have a place in Ireland in a very small town called Doolin, and talk about privacy. I come into town, the entire town knows. I mean, they know everything. I mean, you get small communities. So what is privacy? I mean, in some respects, what bothers me is when people use privacy to monetize off of it. When they use when they use this stuff not for my benefit, but they use it for their financial benefit, where we're giving them all this data. And that's why the Chinese are hacking all the the credit cards and all the rest. So they want to put names against people, and they want to get the photos of the people that posted on Facebook or on a site, so that when they come in the country, they go, oh, I know who that person is. And you can't go into China now without having your fingerprint and your face taken. So they know everybody in there. And if you're a frequent traveler in there, you've got a special card, and they've got all the biometric information on my date of birth, everything else. So now if they know that, and they know and they've hacked into my Bonvoy account, or whatever it's going to be, and they know where I stay, but they have a lot of information. That's what AI is really big data is what we're talking about. It's manipulating big data. And right now, all the data that's but all these sensors and all these systems are doing is, zettabytes of data, of which we're only looking at about 1.5% to 2% of that actually being processed. So it's there. It's just a matter of, how do we process it and who's going to process it and how we're going to make use of it. It's an issue.
All right, we have to wrap this up for the sake of time, but you're not leaving. We're going to be around the facility. We can have a lot of other questions. Anybody in here have global entry? Anybody come into the country with global entry recently? Remember, you used to have to put your hand down and have your fingerprint scanned and answer 5 or 6 questions. I just came in through global entry coming back from ISE, took a picture of my face. I was waiting for the rest of it. It said, no, go ahead, Dave, you're fine.
Yeah, and when I board the plane, same thing. Yeah, it's all happening. I mean, I use Clear all the time, and if you actually Bank of America in headquarters, they're image scanners, and I just walk through the front door, and it just automatically lets me in. It goes, yeah, that's great. Well, not anymore because it don't work anymore, but it did.
All right, so everybody, thank you very much, Greg. I appreciate it. Great access.